droning on, worse verse, and the noses know. This is coming up straight ahead of you on the Use Your Head podcast. Hello, and Merry Christmas from the Use Your Head podcast. I'm John McLean from Dallas, Texas. Tuning in for a half hour of head using. We're going to pick our way through. Yes, we are going to talk about drones today. Didn't mention it last week because I didn't think it was going to be nearly as big a deal as it has become. We will touch on that and other exciting things as we reject the idea, the offer, however generously proffered, for others to do our thinking for us. We're going to look at a few issues, and I'm going to tell you what occurred to me as I used my head with the sole purpose of encouraging you to do the same with your own. You may come to the same conclusion as the so-called experts do, and often that's the case. But sometimes the experts get it wrong. And yes, sometimes that's on purpose because there's agendas and different things going on. So it's important that we cultivate and practice and exercise our ability to use our heads. I'm delighted you've joined us for this half hour, and I'll accept your emails, by the way, at john@useyourheadpodcast.com. john@useyourheadpodcast.com. In fact, one of our topics today came from that very email address from a listener, so we'll talk about that coming up. But right now, before we go any further, let's get on to droning on with topic number one. Yes, the drones. That's our topic today. The internet is just covered over with all kinds of stories. Many of them are chock full of conspiracy theories, and I think I know what happened, and you may be right, you may not be. This is a very, very, let's just jump into it. There's hundreds of them, and the biggest challenge for me was finding the one to bring up. There's lots of them. I chose the New York Post because, frankly, they had the most funny pictures. But anyway, there's information everywhere. So the New York Post titles their article, "Drone Sightings, Live Updates, New Jersey Mayor Rips Dismissive FBI, White House Drone Briefing with Local Officials." So this is one of those articles that updates constantly. And it struck me before we dive into this that this is kind of part of our new information age media, right? I mean, in the old days, the newspaper came out once, maybe twice a day, depending on where you live. And if something happened overnight or something, the story wasn't quite clear, you'd have to wait till tomorrow. Well, now, if you're reading your, quote, newspaper on the computer screen, they update these things in real time often. And so that's the case with this ever-developing story. And so there's a lot of people on this byline. Patrick Riley, Chris Neal, David, Chris Nessie, David Proper, David Spector, and Katie Peliter. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names. And they printed them in red on my screen, so it makes it hard for me to see. But in any case, here's what the latest greatest, according to the Post, is. It says this: weeks into the drones over New Jersey mystery, the FBI and Homeland Security are finally stepping up to investigate and determine what threat, if any, they might pose. Garden State residents have reported thousands of drone sightings going back as far as November 18th. Despite the eerie flying objects taking to the skies above the eastern seaboard nightly ever since, and calls by local and state politicians and President-elect Donald Trump to shoot them down, federal authorities have given no explanation about what the drones might be. President-elect Trump on Monday said the government knows what is happening and accused President Biden and the Pentagon of hiding information. A New Jersey mayor warned Tuesday that the troubling drone sightings over the state may be linked to missing radioactive material, although federal officials say the amount poses no serious threat either way. Belleville Mayor Michael Mellum said the drones flying in a grid-like pattern over his Essex County township appear to be, quote, looking for something. What might they be looking for? Maybe that's radioactive material, Mellum told Fox TV's Good Day New York. A New Jersey mayor is slamming federal authorities for wasting his time after a meeting on the Garden State's numerous drone sightings Monday failed to produce any new information. Middletown Mayor Tony Perry, who attended the Zoom meeting that brought together other New Jersey mayors and officials from the White House, Homeland Security, FBI, and FAA, said the feds were dismissive and failed to shine a light on what may be behind the surge of suspected drones flying over his state. In all honesty, they provided us with no new additional info. In fact, it felt a little bit dismissive, he told NBC News. Perry said the officials rabbled endlessly, and he called the meeting a waste of time. Until they can tell me where these drones are coming from, I do not subscribe to the idea that they're not a threat, the mayor said. All right, so there's just a few little hot takes within this New York Post article. And like I say, the web is covered with coverage about these drones. And there's a lot to use your head on. In fact, I actually got a headache using my head on this earlier today because there's so much to process here. So look, here's what I jotted down a few notes and I used my head. And once again, remember, the premise of this entire podcast is not for me to tell you what to think. That would defeat the purpose. This is not the Use John's Head podcast. It's the Use Yours. So this is what I thought of. And maybe it'll spark some thoughts for you, or maybe you'll think I'm all wet. But look, this is a very scary situation on all levels. It's funny to laugh at it. All right. Oh, these drones. But listen, I live in Texas. All right. I don't have these grids of drones hovering over where I live at night. I would be freaked out legitimately. And so our Jersey brothers and sisters are freaked out, and rightfully so. It's very scary. Number one, we're hearing words like payload. All right. This is a word that in the weapons world usually refers to something very dangerous. You know, what payload do these things have? I mean, these drones can carry things. We've seen them, right? I mean, since drones started coming out and they've been around for a long time in the military and commercial applications. But, you know, when you started to be able to buy them at your local electronics store, you know, as toys, I mean, I've seen drones that are the size of of a pancake. You know, they're very small and they're for the kids to fly around until they crash them and move on to the next thing. And then I've seen drones that are a lot more sophisticated and expensive that are larger, you know, maybe the size of a large pizza, that are used for photography. And I've seen these things used and they're cool. I mean, you can do all kinds of cool aerial photography for a fraction of the cost of helicopters or whatever. And then they came out with drones that were big enough to carry packages. Right. And so a lot of these online retailers, Amazon and others, have been experimenting with having drones deliver small parcels right to your front porch. So all that stuff's going on. And they're being controlled by automated means to varying degrees. You know, obviously, these delivery ones are using GPS technology and so forth and coordinates to pinpoint and drop things, you know, within a 1 square foot area. Fine. But when you start talking about other types of payload, that can get pretty scary. Okay. And so and a lot of this is speculation. I mean, we heard some of that in the article. But here's the other thing that I thought about when I used my head about payload. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there is some sort of dangerous, you know, these are bad actors and there's some sort of dangerous device or substance or what have you, whether it's radioactive or not. We've been hearing about vigilantes, is what they're being called. I call them citizens, who are sick of nobody doing anything about it. And they're just saying, don't worry about it. Pay no attention to the drones hovering in a grid pattern above your town. That's not going to wash with a lot of Americans. And there's a lot of people, if they're being labeled vigilantes, that are threatening to take out shotguns and do a little duck hunting and shoot them down and say, listen, if you're not going to do anything about this, we will. All right. Because no one, quote, official will. See, if you're not an official, then you're a vigilante. I think that language is tacky. But in any case, if these things do have dangerous stuff on them and citizens are out there shooting them down, that could get really ugly really quick. So that's one of the things I thought of, you know, when they start talking about payload. Number two, what is the government hiding? I mean, look, it is hard for me to believe, okay, that even this government, which, you know, we've known for some time now that a lot of people are mailing it in and, you know, that we have big problems in federal law enforcement, big problems in the intelligence community, big problems in the military. We're not in a good place right now with a lot of national security type things. But it's hard for me to believe that even with all that, and even if I believe all that, which I don't necessarily, that we've become this incompetent where we've got these drones flying at night over the eastern seaboard. And what does the eastern seaboard have? Lots of people crammed tightly together, population centers. And the government's saying, well, it's not ours. And they were saying initially that we know that it's not any foreign agent doing this. How do you know? And what aren't you saying? Disclosure of, and look, I'm not saying that the government should tell us everything. Yes, we need to have things that are classified. Yes, there are things that should be on a need to know basis. John Q. Public doesn't need to know everything for his own good. However, when you've got drones that people are seeing night after night after night after night, and we keep being told, well, listen, it's nothing to worry about. What is it? If you're going to have these, this is not the old UFO sighting where I was walking with my wife and we were out in the woods and there was a light above me and it came down and then nobody else sees it. You never see it again. That's different than this, which has been happening for almost a month. What are we not being told? And when you're keeping these secrets, Mr. Government, you got to expect that people are going to say, I don't believe you. You're hiding something. That's just a logical use your head thing. Do I think the government is hiding something? There is no question in my mind. In fact, I'm forced to agree with the president-elect. He's outright, and of course we all know Mr. Trump is someone that says what he thinks, right when he thinks it usually. Look, he thinks that they know exactly what this is. They're just not saying anything for whatever reason. I'm forced to agree with him. And the reason why I'm forced to agree with him because the government is not giving me any reason not to. All right, enough of that. You get it. Number 3. Also, the thing I thought of was the dangers of the drone in general. I touched on this at the top. We started out with the drones are toys. They're like those little helicopters, but they're easier to fly. They're harder to crash. And then, you can put these 1080p cameras on there and do all kinds of cool photography. And they can deliver packages. As people are buying these things, and look, some of these drones are very expensive. I was talking to one of these professional drone photography people that takes video and stuff, makes a very, very good living, but he also spends a lot of money. These drones are very expensive. But there's a danger, all right? Yes, they're handy tools for the things I just mentioned, but now that they've gotten larger and more sophisticated and can be driven by computers or with a joystick, what I'll call, and again, I'm using this term just for my own benefit, weapons grade, where they could carry a weapon if a bad actor wanted them to. And look, we've had drone weaponry in the military for years. Countries all over the world have them. Unmanned drones that go in and blammo. Not saying that's what these are. But I'm not one to push for regulation, but it strikes me that the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they govern aircraft with onboard pilots. They license them, and they do it. It's pretty stringent. You got to have so many hours of training. It is, and if you have a pilot's license, I do not, but I know several private pilots. I know a couple commercial pilots. Your FAA ticket is a very valuable thing, and they are very, very careful and persnickety, and appropriately so, because we're talking about public safety. Why? I don't have to have a license to fly a drone. I don't think, unless that's changed. It makes me wonder, how is the government not aware of who owns these drones, what they are, where maybe they do, but they're saying they don't. But they're also telling us, we don't know, but we know it's nothing to worry about. I know it's wintertime, but the gardener in me says you could dry that out and fertilize the flower bed with it. Keep a close eye on this and your eyes to the sky where you live. Scary. The email address is john@useyourheadpodcast.com. Please accept my thanks for the half hour of your valuable time. I hope you get a lot out of it. If you do, I'd appreciate a review wherever you listen to the podcast on whatever platform that is. Leave us some stars and a couple nice words. I'd appreciate it. And also at the email address, john@useyourheadpodcast, you can suggest a topic. If you find something interesting that you'd like my take on or like to join the discussion, send it along. And that's exactly what Jeff did. I got an article from Jeff at the email address, and it comes from the Oklahoman out of Oklahoma City. Machine bards. This is an interesting article. We're going to AI, by the way, one of our favorite topics on the podcast. This is from the Oklahoman, dated Friday the 13th, which is an interesting coincidence. Here's what it says. AI is giving poetry a high-tech twist. A new study found that readers can't reliably tell the difference between poems written by human literary legends, such as William Shakespeare, and those generated by AI. Even more surprising, many readers prefer the chatbot's work, according to Smithsonian Magazine. A research team gathered more than 1,600 participants and asked them to identify whether a series of 10 poems, 5 by humans and 5 written by AI imitating a human poet's style, were real or machine-generated. The results showed participants guessed correctly only 46% of the time, slightly worse than chance, which would be 50-50, right? Article continues. It is quite a weird phenomenon, said Edouard Machery, a philosopher at the University of Pittsburgh and co-author of the study. He told the Washington Post. The AI behind the verses, OpenAI's ChatGPT 3.5, demonstrated a knack for emulating the styles of great poets such as Shakespeare, Walt Whitman, and T.S. Eliot. Researchers believe this skill stems from the chatbot's training, which likely included large data sets of the poet's original works. But in the second experiment, the team asked 696 participants to rate poems on qualities such as rhythm, originality, and emotional impact. They divided the volunteers into 3 groups. Time out here. Is anyone else thinking about Dead Poet Society, the Robin Williams movie, where was it the intro where it talked about making a graph and analyzing, and then Robin Williams' character rips it to shreds? Sorry, that just came to me. Back to the article. Again, we're talking about almost 700 participants. They're rating these poems. Article continues. They divided the volunteers into 3 groups. One group was told the poems were written by humans. Another was told they were reading AI-generated poems. And the third group received no information about authorship. Unsurprisingly, those who believed they were reading human-written poetry gave higher ratings regardless of the actual author. However, participants who didn't know the poem's origins consistently rated the chatbot's creations higher than the human-authored ones. End of story. Well, using my head, AI artists, and I'm quoting air quotes, which you can't see because that's a sight gag, they are now able to fool poetry fans. And remember, now, these aren't just reciting poems. This isn't like our friend Siri or Alexa saying, hey, read me a poem, and it reads it, in a quasi-emotional way. No. These are being written, created by them, these machines. And now we have a study, and this is a pretty large sample size. We had 1,600 participants in the first run and 700 in the second, and in both of them, it is clear that humans can't tell the difference. I thought back as I used my head to school. I don't know about you and your English. I liked literature. I love writing. I love, not surprisingly. And so I took a lot of that in school. And they tortured us with poetry. I mean, they really did. We were supposed to find the meter, find the hidden meaning, close your eyes and listen and tell me how you feel. I mean, we went through this ad nauseum to the point where you almost started to not like poetry. And we had to write poetry too. But they were teaching us a valuable lesson about humanity, about art, about appreciating the spoken word, about the power of language. All very valuable lessons for becoming a living, breathing, bleeding adult. I mentioned Dead Poets Society earlier, which is, by the way, is one of my favorite movies, and I'll never forgive the Academy for not giving Robin Williams the Oscar for his performance. He totally got snubbed in that. But in any case, if you have not seen Dead Poets Society, see it immediately. Put it on your list. It's an incredible film. I'm going to assume you have, because it's a widely loved movie. The Dead Poets Society, the reason they named it that is because it is a group of people that admire the work of poets who are now dead. But their work and the emotion and the human beauty, the art, lives on. Well, the thing now, alas, about these new poems, these poets were never even alive to begin with. All right? This is very creepy. Okay, I mean, William Shakespeare was a living, breathing human being. And we have his work today that we still study and still admire and frankly are still gobsmacked by. I can still read a Shakespearean sonnet and just be swept away. He had that kind of a gift and an impact, and he's been gone for hundreds of years. There are others. Walt Whitman, T.S. Eliot, there's lots of them. E.E. Cummings, name your favorite poet. Nipsey Russell, the poet laureate of American television. Look, this is very creepy to me, okay? And look, ladies, if you've got a suitor who's trying to woo you with a poem, watch out, because that suitor, instead of being, this handsome beau of flesh and bone, could be cheating a little bit and bringing in circuits and chips into the process. Thanks again to Jeff for the article. Perfect one for the Use Your Head podcast. If you have one, send it along. John at useyourheadpodcast.com. Topic number 3, the noses know. This is a feel-good story. We started off pretty heavy and scary. This is a feel-good story here, especially if you are a dog lover. And if you're not, you should be. This article comes from Yahoo Life, written by Kathleen Joyce. Amazing mold detection dogs are becoming home inspectors' new secret weapons. Article says this: mold, especially black mold, is one of the most destructive, scary, and potentially dangerous things you can find growing in your home, not to mention difficult and expensive to exterminate. Worst of all, if you don't know the potential warning signs to look out for, your home might secretly have a mold problem growing just out of sight. Luckily, home inspectors have a keen-scented ally in their battle against mold infestations: mold detection dogs. Shia, a professional canine mold detector, works for a mold inspection company in Texas and has demonstrated her incredible mold sniffing skills in videos. Now, it doesn't take Shia very long. She works for Mold Dog Nose, also known as Mold Dog Nose on X, and quickly picked up the musty smell that alerted clients to a potential mold problem. But while the humans couldn't pinpoint the source of the smell, Shia's super strong nose quickly zeroed in on a couple of problem spots under a windowsill and a door frame. Bingo. According to Mold Dog Nose Frequently Asked Questions, Zia received over 1,000 hours of training from mold dog training expert Bill Whitstein at the Florida Canine Academy, a renowned canine school that also trains bomb, drug, and other types of detection dogs. When properly trained, mold detection dogs like Shia have an accuracy rate above 90%, making them one of the most precise, reliable methods for mold detection. They can smell mold spores even when their growth conditions aren't ideal or no longer exist, and they can even detect mold that's growing in ceilings. And don't worry, Shia isn't in grievous danger on the job. As Mold Dog Nose explains, she uses, quote, special slits on the side of her nose to purge the air before it enters her lungs, so she doesn't inhale any potentially toxic mold spores. Off the clock, the sharp-nosed German wire-haired pointer is well cared for by her handlers and gets paid for her services in the form of praise and treats. Good girl. Using my head, I love this. I love this. Of all of God's creatures, think of the entire animal kingdom. The canine has got to be one of the most miraculous. I mean, seriously, right? And look, if you're a cat person, I love you anyway. I mean, look, if you like cats, have a cat. But listen, no, they're not no cats running around sniffing out mold spores. Look, what can dogs do? They can help rescue people, right? And we saw that. We've seen that in terrorist attacks, especially. Remember those dogs at 9/11? And, from where I grew up, the Oklahoma City bombing. I mean, dogs can detect life and help find people in tornado damage, hurricane scenes. They're used immensely for rescue purposes. They can also subdue bad guys, right? Canines, lay down and, get on the ground or I'll release the dog. And it works because nobody wants to be, wants to get in the business end of a German Shepherd or whatever, right? They can patrol because of their keen hearing and scent and instincts and scent. They can patrol and provide security. They can even detect seizures. This is a phenomenon we've seen fairly recently where people with epilepsy or other difficulties will have a dog that's been trained to detect signs of seizures or other potential problems, even cancer, before the human even knows it's happening. Remarkable. They can find almost anything, and that's what the mold-sniffing dog, Shia, does for a living. Look, I'll tell you about Tucker. Right? Tucker is our longtime companion. He is an English Cocker Spaniel who turns, Lord willing, 15 next month. Tucker is now completely deaf. His eyes still work pretty well. It takes him a while to get up the stairs. He's got arthritis. He's an old dog. But he has still, to this day, one of the keenest noses I've ever seen. Tucker can find anything. And being deaf, if he's asleep on the floor behind me right now, if I were to get up and leave, and I know what you're thinking, you're not the only one sleeping through this podcast. Yes, that may be true. But the fact of the matter is, if I get up and leave, he won't hear me. I can go anywhere in the house and he can find me by sniffing the ground, finding the scent off the soles of my shoes, and maybe, the stuff I'm leaving behind as I walk, skin cells or whatever. Who knows how they do it? But he can do it. He can find anything. He can find exactly where a squirrel walked across the pool deck 30 minutes ago and is long gone. I let him outside and he'll immediately hit that and go, ooh, something was here. It's remarkable. They can find almost anything. Even my untrained Cocker Spaniel. He's never been to school for anything, but he's got that God-given ability to do that. They are remarkable creatures. And best of all, and this is when I really used my head and thought about the wonder of the canine. This struck me, maybe for the first time, and I've had dogs all my life. They're domesticated. That is not by accident. All right. There are a lot of remarkable animals in the world that can do unique and incredible things. Right. We know about a lot of these things as we've studied them, but they're not domesticated. All right. They're not, you can't own them and have them be a faithful companion for the most part. We have domesticated animals and we have wild animals, if you will. And yet this incredible creature, the canine, Canis familiaris. I remember that from science. That's the scientific name for the common domesticated dog. They are just remarkable. Not only do they provide companionship, and that's touchy-feely, but listen, if you've ever had a dog, you know the value of that. All right. If you've ever lost a dog and been alone for a while till you get your next one, you know what that feels like. They leave a massive hole in your life. All right, enough of that. I don't want to get choked up, but you know what I'm talking about. But they can also do so many other things. And the medical sciences and the behavioral sciences are starting to really catch on to the tremendous value that domestic dogs can provide. Not just out in the field in times of emergency or in a home inspection situation. And yeah, I'd say black mold is an emergency. It sickens people. It can kill you if you're susceptible to it. It's just, and those slits on the side of the dog's nose, I never knew that was true, but they can smell the mold spores, but then they blow the air out. Their brain detects what it needs to detect, but the actual matter doesn't enter the lungs. It's incredible. The nose has its own protection system on the dog. Humans don't. We breathe in. Remember in chemistry, we had to use our hand to smell because we pull it right into our lungs. Dogs don't do that. They have those little exit slits on the side. Fascinating, remarkable. I could go on and on. But the domestication of the dog is the one thing that struck me when I used my head. That is not an accident. We can be thankful to our Creator that we have these amazing companions that not only provide us friendship and love, but can do some really amazing things. That's it for the show. We'll see you next week. And yes, we will do a show next week as we approach Christmas. The happiest of holiday seasons and Christmas to you and yours. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Use Your Head podcast. Bye-bye for now.